So history is weird, right? We actually live in an actual world where Vincent McMahon, a wrestling promoter, this guy, tried to link up with the head of NBC Sports, Dick Ebersol, whose forehead's forehead has a forehead, made a football league that was going to both challenge the NFL, the single biggest money-eating juggernaut short of this one, that was also supposed to be a 2000s version of extreme edgelord smashmouth football. Now, even without the benefit of CTE-riddled hindsight, this was a big gamble for Vinnie Mac. There were a number of things that were working against this league ever succeeding. First of all, the market dominance of the NFL, which is basically 100 years old, and college football, which is older, is pretty much absolute. There is no football league today that even comes close to being in the same breath as the Shield. And when it was threatened for the last time in the 1980s by the USFL, Donald Trump tanked it like he tanks his f***ing casinos. On top of that, the prep time was only a year. Now, this may sound like a lot to people who don't know much about the sport of hand-egg, but in reality, this is barely enough time to get one team ready for a season in an established league. Expansion franchises are given about the same time, really, considering their hiring staffs and coming up with game plans, offensive and defensive schemes, and betting on who's going to be the first player arrested for domestic violence before the draft even happens. 1 year is simply not enough time to set up an entire sports league, even if Vince McMahon did follow the Starbucks model and directly own all of the teams in the league instead of them being franchises. We'll talk about that in a bit. Finally, the league was advertised as hard-hitting, no-holds-barred, rough and tumble. It was supposed to be a return to 3 yards and a cloud of dust, the good old days where the grass was real, injuries were a sign of weakness, nobody knew what a concussion was, and Woody Hayes, head coach of the Buckeyes, straight up punching an opposing player right in the fucking jaw. In practice, this was not quite the reality. Sure, there was a shorter play clock, no fair catches, an opening scramble for the ball, and different rules here and there. But in order for football to remain football and not turn into just a bunch of dudes in pads beating the ever-loving shit out of each other, there have to be rules. And once again, a year is not long enough to sit down and actually decide what those rules are. When you think about it, football has a bunch of rules. You'll know this if you've ever sat down with somebody who's never seen football and tried to explain it. It takes a while. There are a lot of rules. And if you don't have them, it looks like a bunch of gigantic chunks of earth in suits of colorful armor and really tight pants ramming into each other and running around. Now, call me crazy, but this idea could have worked. There's a half-decent argument to be made about how no one can ever complete the NFL until it tears itself apart, which is a real possibility. But that's neither here nor there. Is it, Goodell? But that's what happened before with the AFL in the 50s and the USFL in the 70s and 80s. And if you go way back, there was a time when college teams were considered superior to NFL teams, which is really funny to think about when you weigh the salary of an NFL player against the big fat nothing burger that college players currently get. I would like to point out that around the same time as the XFL, the street ball revolution was going on. This was the phenomenon of and one mixtapes and street ball tours actually outperforming some NBA teams in terms of attendance. But while the street ball tours never actually formalized into something that you could call a real league, and thus fizzled out, the XFL, about the closest equivalent that you can have when you're talking about football, a sport which has huge amounts of gear, equipment, and training of players and officials alike, you can maybe see a scenario where this finds a measure of success. Quick word of note, we're going to have to put on our DeLorean helmets and travel back to a 2001 mindset for this scenario. This is because there is no way a league sold on violence, sex, and everything else to do with the Attitude Era WWE would fly today, especially with all of those recent revelations about concussions and CTE. In 2001, when I was a wee lad begging my father to let me play football, to which he gave a hearty, "Ha! Yeah, fucking right you are, Chief." He didn't really say it like that. There was no knowledge of this, and since the title of this channel is called History is Weird, we're going to have to ignore all of those health things because my videos aren't killing anyone. At least not yet. So the first thing we have to address is the 1 year deadline. In the year of our millennial lord, 1999, the XFL was announced, and the first game played in February 2001. As stated above, this is in no way enough time. If we had given NASA the equivalent amount of time to try and get to the moon, we would have been attempting to fire Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin out of f***ing slingshots. Extend the deadline by 1 year. Plain and simple. So simple, in fact, that the ungritty reboot of the XFL coming in 2020, they're doing just that. Hey, at least he's learning from his mistakes. You go, Vinnie Mac. Keep being fucking terrifying. The other administrative issue is the fact that all the teams were corporate, as in they were all owned and operated by the league. You will recognize this business model as not being used by any major sports league in the US or pretty much anywhere else. This is because sports teams are huge enterprises with thousands and thousands of people needed to ensure they operate well. Making XFL teams franchises will no doubt allow the XFL offices to focus on the more administrative side of running a gigantic f***ing sports league. Before I get into all the on-field stuff, I have to quickly address the XFL's relationship with the NFL, or lack thereof. The first XFL game was held a week after the Superb Owl, which is like having an entire Thanksgiving dinner and then polishing it off with the cranberry sauce for Christmas dinner that you're going to eat tomorrow. As the NFL is slowly experiencing right now, there is very much a possibility of too much of a good thing, even for football fans. So making the first game right after the big game needs to change. Make it a spring-summer sports. Start it in April. Have the XFL Championship in July. That way it's removed from the NBA Finals, and the only real competition is the middle of the MLB season, which, and this is coming from a die-fucking-hard baseball fan, is not much competition, especially when you only have 15, 16-ish games during your season. Face it, the XFL is not going to compete with the NFL. Not at least for the next couple of decades. So try and position it between college and the NFL. Have it be a second-tier feeder league that the guys who didn't make the final cut for NFL teams and, in time, raise salaries, attract better players, and all that jazz. Or rap rock, I guess. Finally, we have to address the on-field product, and oh boy, is it a doozy. For one thing, the real XFL's play on the field was terrible, owing to the fact that their teams were only given 1 fucking month of full-time practices before the seasons. Welders have more job training than that. Now, this is faced by my earlier change of an additional year or more of prep time for the XFL, which just leaves the actual officiating. As stated above, football has a lot of fucking rules, and to keep it football and not a gigantic clusterfuck with a rugby ball that has some sewing on it, you're going to have to keep most of them. What you can get rid of is all the rules regarding player safety. In 2005, the NFL banned the horse collar tackle, and ever since then, they've been on a steady path towards making the game less destructive and more skill-based, which to a lot of people translates as worse. They've been on this march for a while, and while I'm neither here nor there on this issue, if the XFL really wants to push the envelope, then they're going to have to double down. Essentially, the XFL, dare I say, did not go far enough in roughing up their roughhousing. Legalize blocking in the back, clotheslining, make the bump and run zone 10 yards, let them hit a little late. Hell, you could legalize holding and pass interference to an extent. Really, the only thing I would keep is the face mask penalty, because that can literally break a dude's neck and turn the tackler into an unwilling Darth Vader. Also, I'd keep a lot of some of the other things that the XFL did. The players were allowed to stitch whatever they wanted on the back of their jerseys, leading to a bunch of cool ones, including He Hate Me, aka Rod Smart, who became the face of the league and whose jersey I totally want. Somebody tell me where to get it. Oh, and don't forget miking the players up. Something that was so cool that the NFL itself copied it when the XFL folded like a f***ing lawn chair in 2002. Go for this more too. Let the players celebrate all they want. Don't penalize trash talking. Only penalize them when they throw like 5 punches. That should be the limit. Borrow from hockey. Half the people who watch it only do so for the possibility of seeing a French Canadian or Russian guy punch each other on ice. That would be rough and tumble football. Finally, don't sex anything up too much. Yeah, you can focus on the cheerleaders a bit more, but there does need to be some semblance of legitimacy even in 2001, and leaning too far into sex sells is a great way to make a lot of people uncomfortable, including Matt Vajasarian. I'm not shitting you. Matt was the announcer for the first XFL game, and when they showed the close-up of a scantily clad cheerleader, he actually said, "I'm uncomfortable," out loud live on air. Go find the clip if you can. It's fucking phenomenal. With a new unique and XX_hardcore_XX approach, and actual time to make the football at least halfway decent, the XFL could have grabbed a foothold in the market. Then again, even if they did succeed, would they have survived the concussion crisis with all the complete disregard for player safety? Who knows? All we do know is that in 2020, the XFL better not fuck this up again, because I like watching football, but the Arkansas Razorbacks suck, and I don't want to give Goodell any more of my fucking money just so every team can move to Los Angeles and run the sport into the fucking ground. Thanks for watching, and remember that Ray Lewis was an accomplice to a murder trial but got off because of money. Later.